The night my friend set me up with Emma Collins, I realized something very simple about people. Some of them don't want romance. They want an audience. My name is Adam Reed. I'm 34, and by that point, I had been single long enough for everyone around me to treat it like a community problem. My sister sent me profiles. My coworkers made jokes. My friends gave speeches about getting back out there, like dating was a public service I had been neglecting. I wasn't bitter, just tired. I had gone through a quiet breakup the year before with a woman who loved the idea of a stable man until stability looked too much like normal life. No scandal, no betrayal, just two people slowly admitting they wanted different futures and pretending that made it painless. After that, I stayed away from dating for a while, not because I was broken, because I was finally peaceful. Then my friend Mark invited me to dinner. Small group, he said. Nothing weird. That should have warned me. Nothing good has ever followed the phrase, nothing weird. The restaurant was one of those trendy downtown places where the lighting was low enough to hide regret, and the menu used too many adjectives for potatoes. When I walked in, Mark was already at the long table with his wife, two other couples, and one empty chair beside a woman I didn't know. She looked up when I arrived, and before anyone said a word, I saw the setup. Not because she did anything wrong, because the room did. That tiny shift people make when they think they're about to watch something interesting. The quick glances, the suppressed smiles. Mark's wife suddenly becoming very invested in her drink. One guy at the end of the table leaning back like he had bought a ticket. The woman beside the empty chair seemed to notice it too. Her name, I learned a second later, was Emma. She was around my age, maybe early 30s, with warm brown eyes, shoulder-length dark hair, and a navy dress that looked simple in the best way. She was plus size, yes, but that wasn't what stood out first. What stood out first was how still she was. Not shy. Still. Like someone who had walked into a room, understood the temperature immediately, and decided not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Mark stood too quickly. Adam, there he is. I gave him a look. Here I am. This is Emma, he said, gesturing like a game show host with a guilty conscience. Emma. Adam. Emma smiled politely. Hi. Hi, I said. Then Mark added, we thought you two might, hit it off. The table went too quiet. There it was. Not a date, a test. Maybe even a joke. I don't know what reaction they expected from me. Discomfort, probably. Some awkward laugh, a polite escape. Maybe they thought I'd be shallow enough to make them feel superior for noticing it. Instead, I pulled out the chair beside Emma and sat down. Good, I said, because I was hoping there'd be at least one person here I hadn't already heard tell the same three stories. Emma looked at me. Really looked. One corner of her mouth moved like she was trying very hard not to smile. Mark blinked. Wow, starting aggressive. You invited me to a surprise dinner with witnesses, I said. Aggressive feels appropriate. That got a couple of laughs, but they were nervous now. Good. Emma picked up her water glass and said, for the record, I also was told this was a normal dinner. I turned to her. So we were both lied to. Apparently. Strong foundation. Her smile came through this time. Small, sharp, beautiful. That was when I knew this evening might not go the way the room expected. For the first 20 minutes, people tried to behave normally and failed. Conversations kept detouring toward us, then away from us, like everyone wanted to check whether the chemistry experiment had exploded yet. Emma handled it with more grace than they deserved. She worked as a high school art teacher. She had once accidentally ordered 70 pounds of clay instead of 7 because the supplier's website was designed by a raccoon with Wi-Fi. She loved old bookstores, hated cilantro, and had an extremely specific theory that every bad first date could be identified by how a man treated the waiter in the first 10 minutes. That seems harsh, I said. It's generous, she replied. I used to give them 20. I laughed for real. Not polite. Laughter. Real laughter. The kind that made Mark glance over with an expression I couldn't read. Maybe confusion. Maybe disappointment. Maybe the uncomfortable realization that the person he thought would be the joke had become the most interesting person at the table. Then one of the husbands, Brad, opened his mouth and confirmed my lowest expectations. He leaned back grinning and said, "So, Adam, be honest. Is Emma your usual type?" The table froze. Emma's face didn't change much, but I saw her hand tighten around her fork. That was the moment, the one the night had been building toward. The moment where everyone found out what kind of man I was willing to be when a woman's dignity was on the table and people expected me to laugh along. I set my drink down, slowly. Then I looked at Brad and said, "No." The room went silent. Emma looked down. And before that silence could turn cruel, I finished. "She's smarter, warmer, and funnier than most women I've been lucky enough to sit beside." I turned slightly toward her, not performing, just making sure she heard me clearly. "So, if you're asking whether I usually get set up with someone this interesting, the answer is no." Nobody moved. Brad's grin died first. Mark's wife stared into her glass. Emma lifted her eyes to mine, and for 1 second, all the noise in the restaurant seemed to fall away. Then I looked back at Brad. "And if you were asking something else," I said calmly, "don't." That left the whole table speechless, exactly like the title promised. "But Emma?" Emma smiled, not the polite one from before, a real one. And then, with perfect calm, she said, "Well, that was unexpected." I picked up my menu. "Good unexpected, or we should escape through the kitchen unexpected?" She leaned closer, just slightly. "Ask me again after dessert." And for the first time all night, I forgot the room was watching. Dessert became the safest deadline I'd ever been given. Not because the room got easier, because Emma did. Once Brad's comment had been shut down, the table lost its appetite for cruelty and spent the next half hour pretending the whole thing had never happened. That was always the pattern with people like that. They loved a sharp moment until it required accountability. Emma didn't make it easy for them. She didn't storm out. She didn't shrink. She didn't reward anyone with visible damage. She simply turned toward me and started talking like the rest of the table had become background music. "So," she said, unfolding her napkin again, "what do you do when you're not rescuing blind dates from social experiments?" "I manage operations for a regional bookstore chain." Her eyes lit up. "You're kidding." "I rarely start with my most seductive fact, but yes." "That is actually dangerously close to seductive," I laughed. "Books? Books, logistics, and access to staff recommendations? Please, that's a power combination." That was how we got from awkward setup to first real conversation. She asked good questions, not the job interview kind, the kind that made you reveal things by accident. She wanted to know what book I judged people for pretending to like, which store in our chain had the best atmosphere, whether I believed people bought books for who they were or who they wanted to become. I told her both. She smiled like that answer pleased her. Then she told me about her students. Not in the heroic teacher ways some people perform, but with real affection and frustration mixed together. One kid who only drew dragons but made them emotionally specific. One senior who had painted a portrait of her grandmother from memory and made the whole class go quiet. One freshman who kept hiding tiny cartoon frogs in every assignment like an artistic signature. By the time dessert menus came, I had forgotten half the table existed. That apparently bothered Mark. He leaned in with a forced grin and said, "Wow, you two are really hitting it off." Emma looked at him. "Was that not the plan?" His grin twitched. "No, of course, I just mean, you seem surprised," I said. Mark looked at me. I held his gaze. Not angrily. Anger gives people too much drama to hide behind. Just steadily. He cleared his throat and looked away first. "Good." Emma noticed. Of course she did. When the waiter came, she ordered chocolate cake and 2 forks without asking me. I looked at her. Bold. Assumption. "You defended my honor. You've earned shared cake privileges." Is that the system? It is now. The cake arrived, and for a while the evening was almost normal. Better than normal, actually. She had a dry sense of humor that kept sneaking up on me. She made fun of herself without putting herself down, which was a difference I respected immediately. And every time I caught the table watching us, she seemed less embarrassed and more amused. Still, I could feel there was something under it. something she was holding carefully. It came out after dinner. People started gathering coats, checking phones, splitting the bill with the emotional intensity of a treaty negotiation. Emma slipped her purse over her shoulder and said, "I'm going to get some air." I followed 2 minutes later after giving Mark a look that said our conversation was not over. She was outside under the restaurant awning, arms folded lightly, city light catching in her hair. She looked calm, too calm. I stopped beside her. "You okay?" She smiled without looking at me. "That question has become very popular tonight." "That's not an answer." "No." She looked at the sidewalk. "I'm okay. I'm also tired of being okay in rooms where people expect me not to be." That was a sentence with history behind it. I didn't rush into it. She glanced at me. "You handled Brad well?" "He made it easy." "No." Her voice softened. "He made it familiar." That hit harder. Emma took a breath and let it out slowly. I knew what this was 5 minutes after I sat down. Maybe earlier. Mark's wife kept over smiling, and Brad looked like he was waiting for a reaction. I almost left. "Why didn't you?" She looked at me then. "Because you walked in." My chest tightened. Not because it was romantic, because it was trust given before I had earned much of it. "I thought," she continued, "maybe if you looked disappointed, I'd excuse myself, go home, and delete 3 phone numbers before midnight. And if I didn't? Then maybe dinner would be interesting." I smiled a little. "Was it?" She looked at me for one long second. "It became interesting." The door opened behind us. Mark stepped out, hands in his jacket pockets, wearing the uncomfortable face of a man who knew he needed to apologize but hoped the sidewalk might do it for him. "Hey," he said. "Adam, can I talk to you for a second?" Emma looked between us. "I can give you 2 space." "No," I said. "You can stay." Mark's face got worse. Good. He deserved witnesses too. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I didn't mean for anything to get awkward." Emma let out a quiet laugh. "That is an incredible sentence." Mark glanced at her, then back at me. "I just thought you two might be good for each other." "That part could be true," I said. "The problem is you invited us like people and watched us like entertainment." That landed. Mark looked down. "Brad was out of line," he muttered. "Yes," I said, "and everyone who sat there waiting to see what I'd do was right there with him." He didn't have an answer. Emma did. She stepped slightly forward and said, "For what it's worth, I don't need anyone punished. I just need fewer people confusing cruelty with honesty." Mark looked properly ashamed then. Finally. "I'm sorry," he said. Emma nodded once. "Accepted. Not erased." That sentence made me look at her again, because that was the kind of strength people miss when they're too busy judging what's easy to see. Mark went back inside after that, leaving us alone under the awning. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Emma looked at me and said, "You know, I had a speech ready." "For him?" "For the table, for all of them. It was very good, sharp, devastating, possibly too long." "What happened to it?" She smiled. "You ruined it." "I apologize." "No, you don't." "No," I admitted. "I really don't." Rain started lightly then, soft enough not to run from. Emma looked up at it, then back at me. "So," she said, "you asked earlier. Good unexpected or kitchen escape unexpected?" I tucked my hands into my jacket pockets and looked at her properly. Good unexpected. Her smile came slowly, warm this time. "Good," she said, "because I was hoping you'd ask me out without an audience." And just like that, the entire night stopped belonging to the people who set us up. I looked at Emma under the restaurant awning, rain softening the city lights behind her, and realized something uncomfortable. I hadn't wanted the night to end either. Not because I needed to prove anything to the table inside. Not because I felt protective in some dramatic, self-important way. Because the woman standing in front of me had taken an evening designed to make her feel small and somehow made the whole room reveal itself instead. So I said, "Then I'm asking." Her eyebrows lifted. "That fast?" No audience, no committee, no one pretending this was their idea. I smiled a little. "Emma Collins, would you like to go out with me on purpose?" Her mouth curved slowly. On purpose is important. I thought so. She looked past me through the restaurant window, where Mark and the others were still gathered near the bar, trying very hard not to stare and failing badly. Then she looked back at me. Yes, she said, but not tonight. That caught me off guard. She noticed and smiled, not unkindly. Tonight is contaminated. I laughed once. That's fair. I don't want our first actual date to be built on me being publicly underestimated, and you being decent in front of witnesses. Her voice softened. I want to know what this feels like when nobody is watching. That was the best answer she could have given, because it told me she wasn't dazzled by one moment. She wanted something real enough to test in daylight. Coffee Saturday? I asked. Bookstore first, she said immediately. I stared at her. What? You manage bookstores. I teach art. If you take me somewhere boring, I'll lose respect for you. That's pressure. That's standards. I smiled. Bookstore Saturday, then coffee. Good. A car pulled up to the curb behind us. Emma glanced at it. That's mine. I didn't want her to leave yet, which felt ridiculous after one strange dinner and a chocolate cake negotiated by fork, but I also liked that she was leaving on her own terms. Before she stepped away, she turned back to me. Adam? Yeah? Thank you for what you said in there. You don't have to thank me for not being cruel. No, she said, but I can thank you for being precise. Then she got into the car and left me standing under the awning with rain on my jacket and the very strong sense that Mark had accidentally done one useful thing in his life. Saturday came slower than it should have. I spent Friday fielding 3 texts from Mark. I really didn't mean it that way. Brad was being Brad. You're mad, aren't you? I answered the last one. I'm disappointed. That's worse. He didn't respond after that. Good. Emma met me at the downtown branch at 11, wearing jeans, a rust-colored sweater, and a denim jacket with paint on one sleeve. Not styled, not trying too hard, just herself. That was the thing I noticed first. She looked comfortable in her own skin in a way that dinner table had tried and failed to disturb. Before we begin, she said, I judge people by what section they drift toward first. High stakes. Extremely. We spent 2 hours in that store. 2. She pulled books from shelves and told me which covers lied. I showed her the staff recommendation wall and explained how one 80-year-old regular could destroy our entire ordering strategy by recommending a mystery novel to half the neighborhood. She made me pick a poetry collection. I made her pick a cookbook. Neither of us bought the books we came in thinking we wanted. That felt like a sign. Afterward, we went to a small cafe around the corner, the kind with mismatched chairs and a window seat that made people accidentally honest. Halfway through coffee, Emma stirred her drink and said, Can I ask something awkward? Given our origin story, I think we're past normal. She smiled, then got serious. Did you feel like you had to defend me? I could have answered quickly. I didn't. No, I said. I felt like Brad tried to make you the punchline of a joke I didn't agree to hear. Her eyes stayed on mine. And if I had handled it myself, she asked, I would have enjoyed watching him suffer. That got her. A laugh, real and bright, warm enough to pull attention from the table behind us. Then she looked down at her cup. I'm used to people making assumptions before I've even opened my mouth. Men especially. She lifted her eyes again. So when you looked at me like I was simply the person sitting next to you, that mattered. Something in my chest tightened. You were, I said. Exactly. The date didn't end after coffee. It turned into a walk through the art supply store where she bought brushes and made me guess what each one was for. I failed with confidence. She respected the confidence, not the accuracy. By late afternoon, we were outside her apartment building, and neither of us had a clean reason to keep stretching the date except the obvious one. Emma held the bookstore bag against her side. So, she said, good unexpected? Better. Her smile softened. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression changed. Not fear. Fatigue. What? She turned the screen slightly, a text from Mark's wife. I heard you and Adam are actually going out. That's cute. Guess the setup worked after all. Emma stared at it for a second. Then she looked at me and said quietly, I really don't want them thinking they get credit for this. I looked at the message, then at her. They don't. Her eyes searched mine. No? No, they created a bad room. I stepped a little closer. You created everything worth staying for. The expression that crossed her face then was softer than anything I'd seen from her yet. Before either of us could say more, she slipped her phone into her pocket and whispered, Then come upstairs for tea, Adam. I'm not ready for this date to be over. I went upstairs for tea. That sounds calmer than it felt. Emma's apartment was warm, bright, and full of things that made immediate sense once you knew her. Framed student artwork on one wall, stacks of sketchbooks on the coffee table, a blue ceramic bowl full of wrapped candies by the door, plants in every window, some thriving, some clearly surviving on optimism. She kicked off her shoes, set the bookstore bag on the counter, and said, I need to warn you, my tea collection suggests I'm more emotionally stable than I am. I'll try not to be misled. Good. She made chamomile for herself and something with ginger for me, then carried both mugs to the couch. For a while, we didn't talk about the dinner, or Mark, or the text. We talked about normal things. Bad apartment plumbing. The best bookstore smell. Whether adults should be allowed to own more than one decorative blanket without being judged. Then she got quiet. I waited. Emma looked down at her mug and said, The thing about being made into a joke is that people always expect you to appreciate when someone else stops the joke. I understood what she meant immediately. You don't want to be grateful for basic decency. Her eyes lifted to mine. Yes. You shouldn't have to be. That seemed to hit her harder than any compliment could have. She leaned back into the couch, one hand around the mug. I liked what you did. I did. But I think I liked even more that you didn't treat me afterward like I was fragile. I smiled a little. You did threaten to judge my bookstore performance. You needed pressure. I performed well. You did. The quiet after that was softer. Not empty. Full. Emma set her mug down. Adam? Yeah? I'm not asking for a speech. I'm not asking for reassurance. I just want the truth. She looked at me directly. Did tonight change how you saw me? Yes, I said. Her expression flickered. So I finished before fear could fill in the wrong ending. It made me see you more clearly. She didn't move. I already thought you were beautiful, I said. But tonight I saw the way you hold your ground. The way you refuse to become bitter even when people hand you every reason. The way you can accept an apology without pretending the hurt never happened. I leaned slightly closer. That changed how I saw you. It made me want to know you properly. Emma's eyes went bright, but she smiled through it. That, she whispered, was dangerously precise. I was told precision matters. It does. Then she kissed me. Not because I had rescued her. Not because the night had wounded her and I was convenient comfort. It felt like a choice. Clear, warm, and entirely hers. When we pulled apart, she laughed softly and touched her forehead to mine for half a second. What? I asked. I was trying not to kiss you until the second date. How'd that plan go? Poorly. I'm honored. You should be. The second date happened 3 days later. No audience, no setup, no awkward table full of people waiting for a reaction. Just us in a small Italian place where the waiter brought extra bread, and Emma drew tiny cartoon frogs on the paper napkin while telling me about a student who had finally submitted a painting after months of saying he wasn't an art person. After dinner, we walked for almost an hour. She took my hand first. I liked that, not because I needed proof, because it was Emma choosing without asking the room for permission. Mark apologized properly a week later, not by text, in person. He came to my office, looked uncomfortable, and said, I thought I was being funny. I wasn't. I'm sorry. I said, Tell her that. He did. Emma accepted it the same way she had outside the restaurant. Accepted, not erased. That became one of the things I loved about her first. She didn't pretend pain was smaller than it was just to make other people comfortable. But she also didn't let it become the whole room. 3 months later, she invited me to her school's spring art show. I watched her move through the gymnasium while students pulled her from one painting to another, each of them wanting her to see what they'd made. She looked radiant there, not because of how she was dressed, because she was exactly where she belonged. One of her students, a shy girl with purple glasses, asked if I was Miss Collins' boyfriend. Emma looked at me. I looked at her. Then I said, "I'm trying very hard to earn the title." Emma smiled so big the student giggled. A year later, we moved in together. Not because it was dramatic, because Sunday mornings had started feeling strange when we woke up in different places. She brought too many blankets. I brought too many books. We compromised by buying more shelves and pretending that solved anything. 2 years after that, I proposed in the bookstore. Not in front of a crowd. No big speech over a microphone. Just Emma in the art section holding a book she hadn't meant to buy, turning around to find me with a ring and the most honest sentence I had. "I don't want to be the man who defended you one night," I told her. "I want to be the man who chooses you every ordinary day after it." She cried, then laughed, then said yes before accusing me of manipulating her with location. She was right. I absolutely had. And later, when people asked how we met, Emma would smile and say, "A group of people set us up badly." Then I'd add, "Luckily, they underestimated both of us." What would you have done if your friend set you up on a blind date like it was a joke? And then the person beside you turned out to be the most interesting person in the room. And have you ever had someone underestimate you before they even knew you? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.